Hello, I'm the Smoking Cheddar, but if you're watching this, you already knew that. There's no way you didn't. So, this has actually been a requested video through DMs, through the odd message in Discord, the odd comment in the comment section. When are you going to do a complete video on your base? Well, I already have. That one is, at the time of recording, still up. By the time I've completed this recording, I will be taking it down, as it will no longer be relevant. There was a number of mistakes in that video that I will now briefly address. And that is that I left them in there deliberately. I didn't think it was going to get that many views, so I didn't see the point. It was originally designed and for the benefit directly of the Salt Alliance, who I was at the time affiliated with. I am currently not affiliated with Salt. I've moved on to TS. That is a discussion for the end of the video. If you are interested in hearing about that or not, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't affect the base's capability overall. So I won't say what those mistakes are or what they were changed to or anything like that. We will just go through every single item on the list as it appears, and hopefully it will correct itself if you have seen the previous video. If you haven't seen the previous video, don't worry about it because you're now watching the replacement video. Be very excited. Now, that being said, it is spooky season out there, ladies and gentlemen, so make sure you're comfortable, make sure your headphones are on or in, and make sure that your partner is watching a horror movie, like Legally Blonde or something absolutely horrific, for a different reason, obviously. And we're gonna go into the big video of absolutely everything about my base and how it works 2.0. Be sure you have yourself a drink. You are definitely going to need snacks for this one. This is going to be a long video. Jesus, you guys are crazy if you get to the end. So, a brief description on my base, how it was and is being used, and where we aim to go with my setup. So if you watched the previous video, you'll be aware that I started out life as a blocker slash builder. I would move my base into an area, I would block the enemy build, I would make them waste reserves, and set the stage for a counter attack for the rest of the alliance. And it worked. It's been working very well for the last year, actually, to the point where it's worked so well that in the last L4 I was only attacked 5 times. They stopped attacking me. It's not that they couldn't wipe me out, it was just that the cost of burning my base was simply just not worth the effort. So that is a thing that happened. Now, as a result from that, I will now obviously need to be able to diverse what I can do. Now, I was running things like artillery AGs for the offensives and for the counterattacks, which is great. But when there's no one else online, I was kind of struggling. Like if our SOAK members went online with the SH or the Infantry, I was struggling. And that's a bit of foreshadowing. As you can probably see from the top corner of your screen, we have a new addition since the last 2.0 video. And I believe in the last 2.0 video, that was an SH. And it was being used to completely add to defense of the base. So going forwards, we're looking to increase on our defensive capability and expand on that into a base on base or a base to base capability. Hence, we have an infantry unit, and we have it with Everbloom and Vox, because Vox is very good for base defense. She's also good at reducing the damage taken on the unit she's in. So strap yourselves in. How we're going to do this is we're going to go through each individual unit from top to bottom, ground, air and naval. We'll cover the tech. Obviously the tech at this stage of the game for Navy isn't out, so when we get to the Navy we will discuss the camp bonuses and how that comes together in a summary at the end with a better explanation of how this base is designed to now work going forwards. So, my first unit, the infantry. Now, I know what you're saying. That's a 9.0, don't you play silver? Yes, I play silver. Almost exclusively play silver. I just wanted to put it up to a 9.0, just to see what it looked like. And to answer that question, looks the same. And looks pretty cool. I don't know why my Russian modern infantry have MP40s. If you zoom in on the screen, you will be able to see they are in fact MP40s. I guess Lilith hasn't got round to updating the skins for infantry in quite some time. It is what it is. I don't really mind. I do think it's a bit funny though. So the infantry is obviously going to be our base-to-base capability, our soak unit. But we do have a little bit extra. So if we go to this screen for the officer selection, we still have Steel Fighter, and you'll notice that she still has 2 trained skills. And there's a good reason for that. It's because we can put her in that slot. We can put her on the infantry. Now, is she good in base to base with infantry? Probably not. But in a base defense scenario, this little chestnut over here, the impenetrable skill, doesn't actually require her to be on a tank. Neither does the tactical. And this will reduce incoming skill damage to the base by 30%, which is absolutely significant. And this moves into the base blocking, the build blocking and the building capability of my base and where I've gone for it. Yes, it is a turtle style strategy. No, I don't care if that hurts your feelings. And she sits in as a retainer and I can swap her at will with Everbloom depending on whether I'm attacking or defending or just sitting idle or doing things out in the field. It's an immediate swap around. It takes a few seconds. All I have to do is remember to swap to the relevant officer for the relevant task. And I was practicing that throughout the last L4. Now we've got Vox as well. Now if you watched my ATG deep dive video, you'll notice that I said she's a very good defensive officer once she's awakened. That is going to be the game here. That's going to be the goal. Obviously infantry have the highest rate of fire in the game, and this skill when it kicks in will be very handy as a base defense. It has a chance to reduce the incoming firepower on the attack target by up to 30%. Artillery takes a long time to load and fire, boys. Having that skill pop off, it's a big help. We've also stacked blast mitigation as a trained skill on both of the officers as well as a damage resist bonus, so we can effectively soak a little bit more and a little bit better when advancing towards an enemy base. Now this capability isn't actually ready yet, and it probably won't be ready until the end of the next L4, which is going to be a naval L4, and that's going to be about a week away or less than that. So there's going to be a whole other set of videos in regards to that once the naval L4 is underway, but I digress. So that's where the infantry is. It has a role defensively through Vox, and Vox also offensively, and we have 2 officers ready to swap between for defensive or offensive operations depending on how I wish to use that specific unit at that moment in time. So let's have a look at the infantry technology and where we're at and how that progresses going forwards. Now, just for full disclosure, you will see along the bottom here I have 3 tech trees running. I got tipped quite heavily at work, so I activated all of the tech trees. If you are in a job where you get tips, it's a good use of your tip. Go get yourself a Play card, an Apple card, whatever, bung it on the store, get yourself your tech trees, because I've managed to do like 90% of this tree in 1L4. Well, 90% of what you see in this tree in 1L4, I will be specific. So if you did watch the infantry deep dive video, you know exactly where this is going. You've seen the infantry I'm running, you've seen the officers I'm running, and the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice which techs are already maxed out, indicating which direction we're going in. So obviously we maxed out the infantry HP. I know it could be considered a waste of time before you get to the end. I don't think it's a waste of time if you're on a bottleneck tech like I am currently, which is infantry training speed. This only needs to get up to 6, and at the moment I can't advance beyond it, so I may as well pick up everything behind it. We maxed out the damage resistance versus artillery to 10%. We are in the process of maxing out damage resistance versus tanks by up to 10%. We've capped it for damage resistance versus infantry, because infantry on infantry fights are yawn worthy. I won't be maxing this skill out until I want to absolutely 100% the tree, which is probably going to happen, because I've decided that I actually really like using infantry. I think they're great fun. I used them for most of the last L4, and I am considering myself a convert from tanks to infantry. So this is the skill that is relevant for my infantry, and it's Martyr Watch Infantry. Take 5% less normal attack damage and increase the resistance of all allied troops within their protection by 1%. So it does mean if there is a soak AG going on, or an MBT AG going on, I can attach this unit to that AG, and that is going to increase their damage resistance by a whole %. That's before we include Vox's tactical skill kicking off an AoE for the same radius, which is then going to further increase the damage resistance for 8 seconds over a 10-second cycle. Now, where we're going with this is obviously we're aiming for concrete bunkers to increase increase the damage resistance coefficient of the infantry, and it says here damage reduction coefficient for bunker infantry. It doesn't give us any more information on that. Coefficient generally means it's multiplied by another stat within the game. All I know is a 10% damage resistance bonus. If it is multiplied against something else, that's going to make my infantry one tough sausage to cook. So that's where we're going with the infantry. I would ideally like to have this done in the next 20 days, which is a bit of an ask, but I will be going into an L4. And there will be a couple of events between now and when the L4 gets to sort of like the 15-day mark, where I might be able to get sort of down to the damage resist side of the tree. And that's kind of where we want to go with that. We'll probably just skip through most of these. Firing accuracy we're not really interested in. Blast mitigation. If we still have 3 techs running and we hit another choke point, that's obviously going to be getting maxed out. Secondary weapon load time reductions, not really important for us because we're not dealing damage. This is mainly a soak unit. Infantry secondary weapon firepower, same again. We're not really using the infantry to deal damage, so this will probably just be hitting 6 until we get on to the next set of trees. Reserves capacity, again, we're not really looking at utilizing reserves heavily at the moment until we get to the end of the tree, so this is going to be getting updated a little bit further down the line. So that's the infantry. That's what we're using the infantry for. We're using it as a base-to-base capability for me to engage an enemy base, deploy a shield, and then hopefully nuke down their bases. And if that is the case and this starts happening, I will start recording more PvP. I know you guys haven't had a PvP video off me since the summer. If this works, that will change. No one really wants to see turtle gameplay. I don't want to fucking record turtle gameplay. It takes too long to watch, and it's particularly dull. It's fun for me. I enjoy it. But it's not so much fun to watch. So that brings us on to artillery, which is the next 4 units. And each artillery unit is designed to work in a specific way. And I will do my best to now describe those as we go through each one. I will be going between each unit, the officers and the tech tree on a regular basis, so try to keep up. I will try and keep this coherent, but this is where things are a bit complicated because of how I've deliberately designed things. So I'll just try and show you. We'll start off with this gun. This is the defensive gun, and we have Argent Flame and we have Stinger Fist. Now, both of these officers have the garrison tag, and we've got skills for Argent Flame, and we've got attack for Stinger Fist. Now, this unit, with both of these officers awakened, will absolutely destroy and completely cause chaos in an enemy AG. I've seen these two pop off their skills and it just kill random units in an enemy AG, just planking off random units. So we'll just discuss the skills quickly. We have a damage intensity buff while garrisoned of 35%. So, you know, we're going to be able to overcome that damage resistance of the unit we are attacking a lot easier. We've got increased firepower of the artillery unit of 40%, which is going to play in massively into the skill damaged. We've got a damage resistance buff. This is kind of a bit pointless, but it's useful when you do take it outside the base. The Awakened skill is a upgraded tactical skill. It upgrades the tactical skill itself. For those of you who are unaware, what we're now doing is we're dealing 1500 damage coefficiency, and we're targeting an additional 3 enemy ground force units within 1 map grid of that target for an additional 700 damage coefficiency, reduced by 20% for each target. This also boosts the skill damage of the aid officer by 25%, which is Stinger Fist, and we're utilizing his base damage resistance buff of up to 5%. We also get a damage intensity buff of 25%, so we're stacking 2 lots of damage intensity here, and that is fantastic. That means this artillery gun is absolutely lethal at taking out other units. We've also got a separate damage intensity buff here, which again, fantastic. We have this preemptive attack. Whenever this officer's troop attacks, it causes the target troop to become vulnerable, reducing the target shield generated by 25% for 8 seconds, and can be triggered once every 8 seconds. And it reduces the target shield generated by 25%. So if you're hitting me with an SH and you don't already have a shield active, it's going to reduce the effectiveness of the shield by 25%. There was a recent update. Now, the update was designed to counter people from pre-charging artillery and then flattening a base before the defending player could log on and defend his base, or for the defense to actually engage in the enemy. So how they've solved that is by basically pre-charging all base artillery. So as soon as you attack a base, the base artillery will fire. And if you have him, you're going to reduce the target shield before the shield pops off on the tank or on the infantry, unless they have blown a shield buff from the tactics cards. but we get this as well. This is Reign of Destruction. It upgrades his tactical skill yet again, and we're dealing up to 1800 damage coefficiency. So if you remember back to earlier on in the year when we got him, he was one of the first officers to come out with just a flat 1800. We can damage up to an additional 3 ground force troops within range, dealing 600 coefficiency, and increases the skill damage coefficiency by a further 25% when garrisoned. So this guy gets a 50% bonus by being an aide on an artillery piece with Argent Flame being his boss in the captain slot. So that skill damage in a defense is going to be nuts. And trust me, from what I did get out of the L4 in battle reports, which wasn't a great deal, because like I said, I only had to defend my base like 5 times. Yeah, that is as dangerous as it sounds. It is absolutely unfair. We've got 2 officers back to back that will target additional ground units outside the ones that are being targeted for damage coefficiency skill attacks and main attacks or standard attacks. And on top of that, his skill efficiency is just astronomical while he's garrisoned and awakened. But what we're really utilising him for, more than the skill damage, is for preemptive attack and for formidable defense. So that is pretty cool. Now, if you have been watching my videos on the deep dive, I always talk in terms of silver, and I always say let's not bother with the modern tree. And that's true to a point. I don't give the advice to go down the modern tree if you are in silver because of the length of time it takes. I know this because I've done it. It would be more beneficial for you to complete other trees first. That's why I say to you in my deep dive videos, if you are in silver, look to completing your advanced tree first. I went from advanced, I went onto this before I went on city defense. I think that was a mistake. So I'm trying to help you there. But what we're interested in are these pictured ones. So we've got hypersonic missiles. Artillery troops gain a 5% bonus to damage intensity. So we're stacking that damage intensity on that unit even higher. We're getting a damage resistance to all troops. And damage intensity and damage resist get increased based on their current HP with a bonus of up to 10%. So the more HP these units have, the better. We do have a artillery damage intensity bonus versus tanks, which I've put an extra point into. These are quite expensive, so I generally don't put anything in here now. Every 3 shots, a howitzer troop gains a 50% firepower bonus for 4 seconds. The longer you engage my base, and the longer my artillery subsequently engages yours, the more firepower bonuses I'm going to get, because I have 2 howitzers. And I've got one for defense, and I've got one for attack. But we'll cover that in a second. But a 50% firepower bonus when I'm defending myself, every 3 shots, 50% bonus. That's roughly about the same time the skill's going to pop off. Once Vox is awake, I think the skill's definitely going off beforehand. So it's probably not going to be as effective, but it will be effective for the second round of skill damage. So, you know, this is pretty lethal. Of course, we got to the end of the advanced tree as well. When your artillery attacks, there is a 10% chance to reduce the attack's load time by 5%. So obviously the more shots a individual artillery piece fires, whether that's an RL, an ATG or a howitzer, the more that is going to increase the frequency in a single engagement of the load time being reduced by 40%. Trust me, 40% load time reduction is phenomenal. Like, when this thing kicks off, you know about it. It does definitely reduce the deployment time of the next shell, and the enemy knows about it as well. Also, for the howitzers, we have when there are no enemies within 2 map grids of the howitzer, it increases the firepower of up to 5%. This is a bit lackluster when you compare it to some of the other buffs that the howitzers get, but you know, you're firing mostly over 2 map grids in a defensive scenario when you start attacking the enemy backline anyway, so this is actually not too bad. And this is also very handy in a base-to-base scenario where you're going to be at the maximum range anyway. This moves us neatly on to howitzer number 2, the one that subsequently gets dubbed the hammer. And yes, we have changed the officers on it. So naturally, I awakened Venturer. Now, I was going to go ahead and awaken I as the next officer, but I've decided that that's no good if I have no infantry in which to soak an attack on an enemy base, which is why his skills are going to be pretty low. But trust me, this artillery piece at 8.1 capped is deadly with all of the tech that I've got unlocked for it. Bear in mind, all the tech we've just discussed for the 2 howitzers will apply to this one as well. So naturally, we have his tactical skill upgraded because he's awakened. Deals skill damage to an enemy coefficient of 2000. Deals extra skill damage if the target is a fortification by 400, so we're dealing 2,400 versus bases and infantry. If this officer is an artillery troop, the skill has a 100% chance to reduce the prep time of the troop's officer's skills by 1 second. So as soon as he pops off his skill damage, we get a 1 second skill time reduction on the queue for the next skills, which is handy because we have Eye of Providence here. There's not a lot we can talk about. We're not going to worry too much about the skill boost here. We're mostly concerned with the fact we've got it on level 2 at the moment, so we're dealing 750 damage coefficient, and we get a 13% bonus attached to that. So he's dealing a reasonable amount of damage. I could put like a couple of more statues into him, and I could put him up to 1100 with a 16% buff, and that would actually probably make quite a significant amount of difference. But at the moment, this artillery piece is dealing a lot of damage because we're getting the when we're attacking an enemy base with this artillery piece, which is what it's designed for, we're often giving it a firepower buff. We're receiving multiple firepower buffs from the tech tree. You know, we're receiving damage intensity buffs for having extra HP on this unit. The key to we're also getting skill boost damage of up to 15%. We're getting damage intensity versus fortification bonuses. This artillery piece is designed for me to basically drive out and slap an enemy base. I don't really use it for defense. That being said, even in defense, this thing is dangerous. Don't mess with it. It's not as dangerous as the defensive Lib howitzer that I have set up, but it is still damn dangerous to enemy units, especially if you are running infantry because of the fortification bonus. So we are obviously utilizing this. We're also getting intensity bonuses, which are really handy up against bases because obviously bases have really high damage resist. So we want to absolutely max that out. We're getting reduction in load time. Obviously, the more the unit can reload, the faster it can reload, the more shots it can put out, and that stacks with the intensity, you know. And we're going to be dealing more damage. And the artillery does do what it says on the tin. Obviously, we're still using the smart ammunition, which gives us a 50% bonus to the firepower, and obviously hypersonic missiles again as well. And I do try to keep as much HP on that artillery piece as possible, because it is very specific that we need HP to increase the damage intensity by an additional 10%, and that's what we want. We want a higher amount of damage intensity versus the enemy's damage resist. Whether that's defensive or offensive is irrelevant. We need that HP. So that brings us on to the anti-tank gun. This is actually one of my favourite setups for the anti-tank gun. You can see here we've got Maestro and we've got Golden Eagle. Maestro and Golden Eagle. Now, why have I got Golden Eagle? If you missed the anti-tank gun video, the deep dive into the ATG, you're not going to be aware, but let's discuss, shall we? Let's discuss the officers and how they're going to affect things. So I just want, at this stage, this is where the skills are now getting layered. Okay, so I just want you to remember that we're layering the skills. So to bring us back to the defensive artillery, remember we're dealing splash damage to enemies in the surrounding area. We're dealing splash damage to enemies in the surrounding area. We're also reducing shield efficiency, increasing base damage resistance. So we're now going to start layering onto those skills with the anti-tank gun. Now you'll see here we've obviously got the penetration buff of up to 40%. And we'll look at the awakened skill. Skill damage of up to 1500 if the target is stained, inflicts burning on all stained targets within one map grid. All targets within one map grid. So we are splashing damage out again. And now we're dealing damage coefficiency for 200, which is going to be burn over time for 4 seconds, which doesn't sound that great. But when you remind yourself of the fact that you're nuking one target and you're randomly with 2 other officers picking other targets off with splash damage, this additional splash damage can either weaken the next target for an additional splash hit, or it can finish a target off for a splash hit, or it can simply just mark another target for a subsequent hit and wipe it out. It's layering the splash skills. So what we want to do is focus on the target, the SH. The surrounding support units are just going to get hit constantly as well for as much skill damage as possible. So this is building on to a specific set of skills for damage intensity. Now, if you remember, the damage intensity for the artillery tech tree for the modern tech gives us bonus intensity as well as bonus resistance. And this is now going to build on that damage intensity by a significant amount. We're getting 10% bonus damage intensity, which is going to massively help us overcome any super heavy or main battle tank soak unit that is coming at the base. We've got painted shells as well. Each attack of the officer's artillery troop stains the enemy troop, reducing the target's damage resistance by 15%. And this is where things are now going to start making even more sense to you guys. It lasts for 6 seconds. If the target is already stained, another troop is randomly selected within one map grid and is also stained. Also stained. This can be triggered once every 2 seconds, which means as soon as we pop off our skill damage, if that SH is still alive, we're setting fire to whatever gets stained. That's assuming it's not been wiped out, and if it hasn't been wiped out, it's going to get wiped out from this splash skill. We have a normal attack boost as well that's going to help us overcome the damage resistance, and we have an additional penetration damage bonus of 40%. So just from this officer alone, we have an 80% damage increase every time we penetrate an enemy target, which is going to combat the effective debuff of over penetration when you're fighting things like helicopters and like tanks. Golden Eagle. Now this is gonna sound crazy because I think he's actually better on the ATG than he is on the helicopter, and there's multiple reasons for that. Now I'm not saying he's bad on the helicopter. I explained myself a number of times. I just think we should move away from the meta of using Valkyrie and Eagle. I think it gives us too much of a rigid set of thoughts in terms of how we can use these officers. There's a lot of officers in the game, and I'm now showing you how I'm layering these skills with the officers that are available, and you can do this too, with tank, with infantry, with navy, with air. It's about layering skills. So his awakened skill increases the normal attack boost. Again, we've got this on Maestro. Of this officer's troop by 20%, and its normal attacks ignore up to 10% of the enemy's total damage resist and can go up to 15%. So we've got two skills between these two officers where we can ignore damage resist or lower the enemy damage resistance, and then we're increasing the damage done. We have a penetration buff damage here of an additional 40%. I did sink money into this officer specifically to get that skill. That is a bit of a pay to win mechanic. I don't approve of it, but I done it anyway because it was a few quid and I just thought, why not? We do have a damage resistance buff, and that is mostly because when the ATG is outside the base, it will get targeted pretty heavily, and when it's in AA mode, it is nice to be able to shoot things out the sky without them bombing you to bits. So this is a bit of a weird one, the critical strike for the anti-tank gun. It's not particularly effective. I'll be the first one to admit that. It's predominantly down to the rate of fire over the critical strike rate. The frequency is pretty low. It's a 1 in 10 shot, but I mean, how many shots are you going to get off in a 40-second engagement? Not that many. Are they going to crit? Well, you got a 1 in 10 chance. It's not particularly brilliant. It's not. When it does crit, it hurts, don't get me wrong. Like, the enemy know they've been crit. The problem is it's just very, very lackluster. We're relying quite heavily on our penetration damage, our intensity buff, and our ability to reduce the target's resistance. But also it plays into preemptive attack, where we're reducing the target's shield that we are attacking as well. So we have a damage intensity buff of 20%, so again we're stacking damage intensity. And of course the awakened skill, he does 1500 damage coefficiency plus an additional 80 per 100 millimeters of armor. So that means if you are coming at me with an SH, we are getting a total of 40, 80, 120 bonus just off officer skills for penetrating your tank, and we will deal that percentage in damage bonuses. We're getting damage intensity of 10. We're getting a normal attack intensity bonus effectively of 7.5. We're getting a normal attack boost of a further 20 there, so that's 27.5 for the normal attacks. Plus we're ignoring up to 15% of the target resistance. But we've also got this buff, which stacks alongside this buff. We are increasing the base damage resistance of the base while the ATG is garrisoned by up to 10%. So let's have a look at the tech and see how that reflects with what we're doing. Whenever an anti-tank gun troop penetrates enemy armor, it gains 5% firepower bonus for 4 seconds and stacks up to 3 times. It's always going to pen armor. It's not a case of when it will, because it just does. Of course, we're getting damage intensity as well. So I think it's quite clear how lethal this anti-tank gun can be against armoured units when you're attacking a base, especially if someone's really thought about how we're going to increase the damage intensity and how we're going to increase the penetration damage. But it's not only that, it's increasing the amount of damage resistance that you yourself have while you are garrisoned, and then the damage resistance you have when you get out into the field and you start to go on the attack with these units. So it takes a little bit of forethought, a little bit of planning. Obviously, we don't have all of the officer trained skills up to scratch yet, but we don't have all of the ground force officers awakened yet either. We are 3 short on that one. But we're working on it because we're doing Everbloom, then we're going to do Vox, and then we're going to move on to I. And once we've done that, we're going to clip through all of the trained skills for our capabilities respectively. And that is going to then play into it even more. So you can see how these two defensive guns work together. We've got the Liberty defensive gun and we've got the ATG. We're looking to debuff the target, cause splash damage and mayhem. We're looking to debuff the target, penetrate the target, cause splash damage and resist enemy attacks. It's very, very important that when you set up your base, you think about what it is you want to do and you layer your skills accordingly. Much like I have. And that brings us neatly on to the RL, which regularly gets binned off by a lot of people. I see a lot of people say this is not worth it, this is just a rubbish unit. I disagree. And we're also going to correct a mistake that I very famously put out in the last video. And I didn't realise I was actually known for this mistake until about 2 weeks ago. So it's time to actually address the elephant in the room. Yes, I left that mistake in, as I said at the start of the video, deliberately because I didn't think anyone was going to watch the video. We will now correct that mistake. I was aware of that mistake when I edited the video. I left it in. You have my apologies. But let's get to the RL. Let's have a look at the officers and see what we're doing. So the RL. We've got Warrior Wiz. And we have this gentleman here. Saber of Nations. Let's start off with Warrior Wiz, shall we? So why have we got Warrior Wiz on the RL? Well, this now plays into both the attack and the offense, and it also gives us a little bit of field capability. Not a great deal. Obviously the RL is incredibly squishy, and if you get hit while you're using the RL, you can kiss goodbye to the unit. It's gone. It's vaporized. But what we do have is we have a 1500 damage coefficient with a bonus 300 damage coefficient, which then applies a 15% damage resistance debuff to the target for 4 seconds. So this very specifically plays into the anti-tank gun officers, and it also plays into the defensive gun officers, also with debuffing the target, splashing the target with extra damage, and then increasing that gap between your damage intensity and their damage resistance. That is what we are looking for. We have a damage intensity buff that actually increases with each map grid, or we have a damage intensity buff that actually increases with one map grid distance, which is very easy to do in a defensive scenario. It's also very easy to do in an offensive scenario when you're hitting an enemy base, of getting that extra 4.5%. It's not quite a 20% damage intensity increase, which would be nice if it was just a flat damage intensity increase, but I'm not going to complain. It's 19.5 when you're attacking an enemy base. It is what it is. We do have a critical strike rating, and much like the critical strike rating on the ATG, it's not particularly great. It's predominantly down to how slow the RL fires, or can fire. We also have this, the Master Hacker skill. Whenever the officer's troop attacks an enemy ground force troop, it has a 15% chance of resetting the target load time, preventing them from attacking. This is handy against things like MBTs predominantly. Not so handy against enemy artillery. Generally, if I'm in my base garrisoned and that RL has targeted your artillery is dead. It's going to hurt quite a lot because of the damage intensity bonuses and the firepower buffs that I have through the tech tree. So it will one-shot your artillery. Plus, you've got to remember that it might have the smallest ring radius for attack, but it does get a +3 radius from being inside the base. So that's Warrior Wiz. He's not particularly great as an officer on that unit. He is and he isn't. Like, he's dealing... I'm really utilising him for his damage resistance debuff. So when that pops off on things like an SH or an infantry unit that's attacking the base, it's going to help me gap that unit's defence with intensity, and it's going to help me destroy it a lot faster.
There is no life for me but the army.
The elephant in the room. Or the eagle in this case. Now, in my defence, when I done the last video, this was written differently, and my understanding was based on how it was written. However, when I released the video, there were 2 problems attached with the RL, and I believe he was on the RL at the same time. So out of the 3 major problems, this is kind of tied into what I'm now trying to correct. So, Rain of Blades. The attack of this artillery officer's troop has a 30% chance to instantly activate Sabre of Nations tactical skill of this officer's troop. Not all troops, this officer's troop. So previously it was worded all troops. That's not what it was doing at all, even though that's what it said. Now it specifically states this officer's troop, so a 30%. So this is where I'm layering some other skills. The RL is notoriously slow to fire. Kind of. So this also then ties in with the other issue I had with the RL. I even displayed the fact that you could simply change target to fire. That was actually a tech that I had unlocked, and I was being silly, and I left it in the video, and I apologise because that was really bad advice. That was really bad wording from me, and it was just... I knew when I edited the video what I said was wrong in regards to the RL, and you have my actual apologies for watching that, because that was really, really bad of me. But let's correct that now and show you how this skill and the RL's load time reduction are now being layered correctly. So naturally we're getting a damage intensity bonus from the RL and a damage resistance. Not that it really matters because the unit gets squashed like a bug anyway. Alloy barrels. Each time a rocket launcher troop fires, its load time is reduced by up to 0.2 seconds, up to a total of 0.4 seconds for the next reload. So we're getting almost half a second reload reduction from this tree. Reduces the load time for the rocket launcher's first reload by 1 second. Now, what does its first reload mean? I actually demonstrated it in the last video, and I explained it very badly. In fact, it was so badly to the point it was misleading, and it has now caused me to make an apology in this video. So, reduces the load time of the rocket launcher's first reload by 1 second. Let's give you a quick demonstration. Okay, so for this demonstration I'm going to try and produce multiple targets for me to shoot at. And what's going to happen is every time the RL kills a unit and then switches to a new target, that technically counts as a first reload because it's a new target. It's also going to layer with the load time reduction from the modern tree. So let's see if we can display that. So there you go, it's gone down to 2 seconds. We're on 5 seconds there, as we're now destroying the main bunker. It's switched target, it's gone down to sub 2 seconds. It's switched target, it's gone down to sub 2 seconds. And again. And again. And again. And you'll notice that I'm getting big orange skills pop off as well. Because every single... That was a tactical skill that had popped off. Because every time that unit fires, we have a 30% chance to activate Sabre of Nations skill. So that's how this is being layered. In a defensive scenario, very specifically a defensive scenario, we are looking at being able to attack a target, rotate onto the next target, attack a target, rotate onto the next target. And all the time, you're getting a 2-second load time or under. You are using a 30% chance on attack to deploy a tactical skill, which gets 1200 coefficiency plus 100 per map grid between you and the target, which means the further the target is away, like artillery for example, the more damage you're effectively going to do. So the RL is actually really good at dropping skill damage in a defensive scenario if you're layering the skills like that. That's how I've done it. It does work. It is very dangerous. The only time it really does slow down is when we're up against things like SH or Infantry, where it takes 1 to 2 volleys for you to kick off. But we have other artillery also dropping debuffs at the same time. So generally, it is only 1 to 2 attacks. Very rarely does it go above 1 or 2 attacks. So I hope that I've corrected that mistake very specifically from the previous video. And that's my ground setup. Now, it is very artillery heavy, obviously, because of the way I initially set out to be basically a turtle, a base blocker, and a builder. So I was able to think in advance. It's taken me just over a year and a half to reach this point, nearly 2 years to reach this point, and it's been worth the time investment. It's most certainly been worth the time investment for the ground. And the ground is predominantly a defensive capability. We do have obviously the infantry, the RL, obviously it is going to deal a hell of a lot of damage as we're utilizing the attributes of the RL against enemy bases. What do I mean by that? Well, we are getting a personnel multiplier of 200% when hitting infantry, but we're getting a 350% damage multiplier when we're hitting a enemy base. And what you've got to remember is every time I launch an attack with the RL, it reduces the load time of the RL by up to almost half a second, and we have a 30% chance to pop off a free skill damage. So that means roughly every 10-second cycle we're going to get 2 shots off, and you've got approximately a 50-50 chance of getting a free skill shot off in that 10-second cycle. What do I mean by a 10-second cycle? Well, it's 8 seconds for your skill timer to charge, and then it's 2 seconds before the aid one pops off, and then it resets with the 8-second charge time. So that is a 10-second cycle. So if you ever hear me say a 10-second cycle, that is specifically what I'm referring to, and that is how I've based my skill damage output. I've based it around that, and it does work. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any battle reports to show you of of any defense, because the last L4 our main opponent was GL, and they didn't really attack. Unfortunately, neither did HKMZ or any of the other enemies from the L4. It was very, very quiet. Everyone decided they were going to sit inside their bases, and as a result we were able to win. But you can see I've gone all the way back here to well over 2 weeks ago, and I've got nothing to show you as confirmation. So hopefully we'll be able to drum something up during the next L4, but there's no guarantee. And now we're going to move on to the air. Now the air is going to operate slightly differently, obviously, for multiple reasons. It predominantly not being on the ground, but also how I have designed my air and how I'm layering my air skills. So as you can see here, we've got 3 units, all from the Vanguard tree, and we've got 2 interceptors and we've got 1 bomber. Now the interceptor at the bottom in slot 3 is currently being worked on. It's not engaging enemy units in the air unless they're particularly weak. But our main, or my main, offensive capability here is actually the fighters and the bomber. So how I go generally on offense is I use my air assets. I find it very easy for me to now pick off enemy aircraft, and then utilizing that level of capability, then I bring in my Vanguard bomber to then pick off the ground units. So let's explore that and see how that works in relation to the overall strategy. So the interceptor I have, obviously the Vanguard is known for being the interceptor, and yes, we all know the intercept was the intercept mechanic was nerfed slightly because people like me were there's no better way to say it other than the fact we were just simply using it to the maximum capability. You might call it abusement. I call it utilizing game mechanics. Now, a lot of people don't like Bladewing. He's a bit of a Marmite officer. Some people love him, some people hate him. We do have Darkwing. He is going to be replacing Brisk Eagle, and Brisk Eagle is going to be training the critical strike damage skill that we kind of need for this to work. And then later on, we're going to change all of the officers entirely. But for the time being, let's just discuss the officers as they are. And we're only really focusing on the 8.1s. We don't really care about the 7.0 because that's not really something I'm using. It's being built up as a capability, and it'll take probably another 6 months. So we're really utilizing his skill damage here. It's while this officer's fighter plane troop is in combat with the enemy air force, every 4 seconds it deals damage to the enemy of 1100 coefficiency and has a 75% chance to reduce the cruising speed by 50% for 4 seconds. Makes it very handy to chase down enemy aircraft, and has a 25% chance to deal damage to itself as 100 damage coefficiency. Can suck a little bit. You end up basically destroying your own aircraft. But the trade-off is you're dealing about 1100 damage coefficiency and you are able to chase, and the intercept mechanic is quite powerful. Obviously damage intensity, because we need damage intensity quite heavily in this game now. Intercept. So for those of you not aware, this is the intercept mechanic, an ability that affects the fighter plane's intercept damage, which is the damage dealt by the initial attack upon entering combat. The higher intercept leads to increased damage intercept, or intercept damage I should say. So when you stack the intercept mechanic, basically what you're doing is you're slamming into the side of the enemy fighter or the enemy bomber, and you're just going to go, hey, I'm going to deal 1,000,000 points worth of damage to you. That's going to knock out 3 of your fighters and instantly give me a firepower advantage in the sky. That's how it works. How they've combated this is by basically reducing the intercept mechanic slightly and increasing the firepower on other aircraft. So even if I do slam into the side of someone in the middle of combat and I do reduce them, the interceptor is now very weak in a straight up fight for an extended period of time, and is very easily outmatched by the Liberty and Martyr fighters respectively. That being said, I do still have a soft spot for the Interceptor. They move pretty quick, and we do get a slow ability using this officer. So I gotta keep it. Now, he can heal himself, but it's not particularly good. This officer's fighter plane has a 30% chance to recover HP after killing an enemy unit. It's not particularly useful when you're basically only killing units on an intercept. But it is for more coefficiency than what would otherwise be dealt to you. The downside is it's once every 4 seconds. Rather than, every single time. Because otherwise you could just fly in and out of combat. They had to do it, didn't they? I mean, there was no other way around it. Well, what we're doing is we're training in, obviously, an intercept buff, which is at 3 out of 5, and we have a critical strike rating of 20%. And that just increases every time we score more. That just goes up.
Let me test their metal.
So, brings us on to Brisk Eagle. We're using a critical strike of up to 30%, but we're also doing this after landing a critical strike with its normal attack. This officer troop can take no damage for 1 second, and this could be triggered 1 time every 5 seconds. Now, that's significant because when you are intercepting an enemy target, if you slam into the side of them and they return fire, the second shot that's coming your way, not the first shot, because obviously the targets on intercept deal damage at the same time, will be negated. So it's not as good as it used to be, I'll be honest, but that's still fairly useful, especially considering we're stacking critical strike rating through using Darkwing. This still has its capability. We've got a firepower buff, and we have additional critical strike damage, which is important. Additional critical strike damage. So we're dealing 50% more crit damage every time we score a critical strike. That is very handy because it means instead of doing 150% bonus damage, we're now dealing 200% bonus damage. We also get a speed increase. So this helps with the intercept or the actual chasing down of enemy units. So if they're trying to get away from me and I manage to get off a cruising reduction on them, I've also got a cruising speed increase on myself. So that means I've slowed you down, but hey, guess what? I'm going faster than the average aircraft anyway, so I'm going to catch up to you. Very, very nice for chasing down enemy bombers that think they've got away with sniping an artillery unit. You guys don't get away from an interceptor, I'm afraid. You don't. So how are we utilizing this combination of skills? How is this set of skills layered? Well, using the intercept mechanic, we're basically diving into a fight. We're triggering a intercept damage, which we're kind of hoping is going to crit. I'm not going to lie, we're kind of hoping either that is going to crit or the next attack is going to crit, and then we're just staying in the fight hoping that that initial strike is enough to give us a big enough lead, so when this coefficiency pops off we can then gap that lead. We can shoot down more aircraft than you can shoot down in a shorter space of time. That's how I'm working the interceptor. I want to deal a very, very high volume of burst damage to then give me more HP in the sustained and standoff fight that then comes along. I win some, I lose some. Before the intercept debuff, I won nearly every single fight I got into. Now it's a bit 50-50. I have to plan my attacks a bit better, and that's why I'm trying to build up a capability with a second interceptor, and we'll just send a squadron together, and we'll have double the effect in shooting down enemy aircraft. So that's how we're using it. It's a very offensive unit. We're using it to secure airspace and be a dominant presence in the sky above enemy AGs, not just our own in a defensive holding pattern. We're looking to dominate the sky, and it does that. I'm sorry, it just does. So the bombers, My bomber particularly doesn't have much in the way of statue investment. As you can see, we're using El Cartero and we're using Lone Eagle. Lone Eagle because he has the highest amount of damage coefficiency, and Lone Eagle at and El Cartero at the moment because he has the stun capability. But once we are in a position where we can move statue production away from our ground force and we can focus more on our air, we are going to replace him with Rising Star, and that's because when he is awakened, he is going to deal way more damage, and the goal is then not to chase down and stun a unit so we can hit it 2 or 3 times. The goal is to fly up to that unit, drop a single bomb on that unit, and fly back. Just wipe it out in a single hit. So we're aiming towards getting Rising Star, but that is in the future. So what capability do we have now? We have a damage intensity buff. We have a random shield that can pop off. This does save the bomber from time to time when there is an enemy light tank on the ground, so don't underestimate that skill, especially if it is not being especially if it is being utilized by an enemy fighter. That skill is a massive pain in the butt. Massive. I was almost to put it on to my own fighter, but I elected not to. We have damage intensity versus tanks and helicopters is increased. Again, this is only really good once we use this as a trained skill on Inferno. And we're dealing 1350 damage coefficiency straight off the bat. We've got him to level 3 at the moment. So he can deal a lot of damage to enemy artillery very easily. If I can spot one and I've got the air secure with the fighter, if your base isn't close enough, I'm afraid I will just simply bully off your artillery if you don't have enough fighters in the sky. And this is where my offensive capability lies predominantly. It is in the air. It's being able to dominate the airspace and then utilize my bomber. My bomber is not as good as my fighter, but it doesn't have to be. My fighter just needs to secure the airspace so my bomber can do its work. And then you've got to remember, the closer you are to my base, the more damage I'm going to be doing per minute with the bomber, because it'll fly out and come back a hell of a lot easier. So that's the air. Let's have a quick look at the tech tree. The reason why I didn't show you the tech tree with the fighter is because I haven't actually completed it. So we've only unlocked Cobra maneuvers. We haven't bothered with the bomber. And this is when your fighter planes are attacked, there's a 10% chance their maneuverability will increase by 30% for 2 seconds and can trigger every 10 seconds. This is quite handy because it means that when we engage in an intercept, there is a high probability that we'll have a critical strike going off, and there is also a high probability that we'll have a maneuverability buff go off. And if we do get a critical strike, we're also getting a incoming damage negation for a second, and we're also getting a maneuverability buff, which will then allow us to dodge more incoming attacks. So this is really handy in the standoff capability of my fighters, and it's pretty gross, I'm not going to lie. When I do come up against someone who has bad officers on their fighter, they get punished pretty quickly. We have increased the bomber ground firepower. I probably should have maxed this out, but I just haven't got round to it. We do have reserves capability. This is kind of useful because aircraft eat up a hell of a lot of reserves. Aircraft are very expensive units. Fighter plane intercept bonus, we haven't maxed this out yet because we've been putting all of our efforts for the meantime into the infantry tree, because we just want to get that done. We just want to get that done and dusted. We want the infantry to be absolutely at the peak of our capability for going into a base-to-base situation when an L4 is coming up. But once all that's done and dusted, we're going to be working on the aircraft again. So that was nice and easy. It was a little bit quick compared to the ground. That's our air capability. It is a damage orientated, domination orientated. We want to make sure we've got control of the air, and then we punish anything that's on the ground. It's nice, I'm not going to lie. Now, probably the moment a lot of you have been waiting for, because I haven't done anything on the Navy in terms of deep dives. That's because the tech tree is currently unavailable. When the tech tree becomes available, we can start doing the deep dive videos into how we can utilize these more. So at the moment we've gone for 3 destroyers. I'm kind of betting on the fact that destroyers, aircraft carriers, submarines and frigates are all going to get separate bonuses. And I wanted a destroyer pack. I wanted to have the capability of being able to go toe-to-toe, base-to-base out in the ocean. And the armoured destroyer gives me that capability as being a bit of a soak with the highest HP and sloped armour. We have the T-47 anti-air that increases the missile intercept bonus of nearby vessels as well as shooting down enemy aircraft. And we've got the missile destroyer as well, which does what it says on its tin. It's just a powerhouse for damage. This is pretty much an all-round setup from what I have determined in what PvP I have conducted over a couple of nights in the L3. And I can base to base with this setup pretty easily. It doesn't really, it's not overly costly, providing I choose my targets correctly. Okay, so this is the best example I've got so far of a base-to-base capability against another opponent. This guy was a little bit lower than me. Obviously, I'm not going to go toe-to-toe with someone the same capability without having officer statues put onto the soak units, which I'm not going to do for quite a considerable length of time because I still have, you know, like 4 air officers to do. I've still got 3 ground officers to do, and I've still got all of their trained skills to do as well. So that's a lot of statues and a lot of time, and I feel like if I start diverting statues into the Navy, it's going to affect effectively my original plan. And I'm sticking to the original plan because it seems to be working. But as you can see here, we've done 8.1 million in skill damage from the missile destroyer. We didn't deal a lot of damage from the armoured destroyer, but we did soak quite a bit, 3.3 million, and we've managed to deal quite a bit of damage with the anti-air destroyer as well. I should have really recorded this, but I didn't. It is what it is. I didn't think actually at the time to record it until after I'd done it, and I was like, oh well, never mind. The next L4 is going to be a Navy L4, and I probably will record PvP within that, and we will see how things go. And yeah, we're just going to play it by ear. So this is my Navy. Obviously, we've got the event officer on the cruise missile destroyer. We've got the shield officer on the armoured destroyer, and we do have this little gem of an officer, the Martyr officer on the Vanguard anti-air destroyer. I kind of want him on the missile destroyer, if I'm honest, but at the same time, I kind of also want him on the armoured destroyer, because of his missile intercept capabilities. But we don't have extra officers at the moment, so I'm doing the best I can with the setup I have. And because we can't actually show you any tech trees or any bonuses, what I can do is I can show you some attributes and some unit descriptions surrounding these at the moment. So we'll start off with the armoured destroyer. It's countered by the aircraft carrier, capable of reducing damage taken by garrison troops. It says it all. It's going to be the soak unit that you need. So if you're going for a base-to-base capability or you're going for a field capability, at some point you are going to need to look into the armoured destroyer. So obviously we've got him at 6.0, that gives us 229k in firepower, it gives us a 94k in HP. Our pen depth goes up to 250 with a sloped armour of 190, which means when you're in a defensive situation, if you do have one of these units in the defensive scenarios, you are also going to be penning armoured destroyers and other destroyers that are attacking your base, like an ATG would. The guided missile destroyer from Lib. Heavy missiles capable of dealing huge amounts of damage to fortifications. Like I just showed you that, it dealt quite a lot, and that's why I've got the high skill damage officer on the guided missile as well. Let's have a little bit. It's countered by armored destroyers, but it counters anti-submarine frigates pretty easily. We have 668k in firepower and 54.2 in HP. But we've got a sloped armour slightly lower than its armoured counterpart, and we do have a missile speed of 480. So, as you can see, an armoured destroyer will absolutely hammer into the side of this thing. Just as comparison, the firepower is massively different, but the penetration bonuses are also going to come into effect. So that leads us on to this little chestnut here, this little gem. The anti-aircraft destroyer. Now this is the specific reason why I went for a destroyer pack. Air defense network. Allied warships gain missile defense buff within range of the anti-aircraft destroyer. Now what is the missile defense? Well, if you've played the campaign or you've done any PvP, you'll notice that the destroyers fire missiles at each other, and the destroyers and the aircraft and the aircraft carrier, they then launch out interceptor missiles, little tiny little dots on your screen that go out and then they blow up the missiles that are coming in. This destroyer increases that capability, which is why I think what I've got is a really good setup. And I say I think, I haven't really had a chance to explore or exploit that setup yet. The L4 will be naval. If we go into silver, it will be capped at 7.1, and it looks like I'll probably be close to 7.0 across the board within a matter of weeks at this stage of recording. So before the new year is out, I will probably have at least one 7.0 or at least one 7.1 for silver 2. I've dropped down into silver 2, by the way, but we'll discuss that at the end of the video. So at 7.0 we do have a little bit more HP, we do have a little bit more firepower, so I could, just stick the defensive officer on this, but nah, I mean, there's no point. I'm only one unit away from being able to have a 7.0 armored destroyer, so it doesn't really appeal to me to do that at this stage. Destroyer packs are going to be quite good, I think. They're going to be very versatile. You're going to be using them in what is effectively going to be open naval warfare, and you're going to be using them in base-to-base quite heavily. The aircraft carriers will be doing much the same, but at a longer range, but you've got to remember the aircraft carrier cannot fire and move. The destroyers can, and with certain skills, those destroyer packs are going to be pretty dangerous at closing in and wiping out the air assets. So let's have a quick look at the officers. So Liberty Blaze, obviously he's on the missile destroyer. We're currently dealing 1500 damage coefficiency with an 11% damage intensity buff. We've got a 18% firepower. We've got a 16% normal attack buff, and we have a speed increase of 3% and a load time reduction of 2%. I don't think the load time reduction's particularly good, but the speed increase is nice, especially for the missile destroyer. Very, very nice. Armoured, we've got the shield and damage resistance. This is where I'm kind of sitting on the fence as to whether or not I should put in like maybe 50 statues during the L4 just to get the officer skills all up to level 2 on this officer, and then a couple, and then like maybe one on the anti-aircraft destroyer. The problem is if I do that, that's then going to, again, like I said earlier, detract from my ground and my air, and these are the two things that I really want to focus on more. Naval, I think, is good, but there's not enough statues available in the game for me to really utilize this. So unless I'm going to start spending a hell of a lot of money on daily statue packs, you're going to have to choose, I'm afraid. And on the anti-air destroyer, we do have this guy. Now, if you watched my officer video, which I edited this morning and uploaded this morning, this guy deals a hell of a lot of damage. I'd like to pair him on the missile destroyer with the event officer, but I can't do that because I need an officer on all of my ships. The reason why is because all of the ships bring something different to the table, and I need to be able to do something. I need to be able to, you know, produce a result. So we've got an HP firepower buff, we've got a missile defense buff, and obviously him being on the anti-aircraft destroyer, which already then provides an additional anti-missile buff to its neighbouring ships. We're just increasing that slightly for the initial ship that he stood on, which I think that's a pretty good idea. That gives us a nice little flat bonus of 10%. So that's the Navy. So with the naval update brings a slight change in everyone's lineup, and this is now important once more while we all choose our lineups. Now, the reason why this is important is because depending on how many units you have of one particular camp and another will affect your damage intensity bonuses through this system. It will also affect your damage resistances through this system, and if you are looking for a base-to-base capability or you're looking for a survivable capability, this is a good way to min-max that. So this is how, and again, this is part of the reason why I have done what I've done with my Navy, is because each Navy has one destroyer, so I'm hoping that I'll have one tech tree that I can just absolutely smash down. But also, I get +1 to each faction. So let's have a quick look. So this is quite important. So for Liberty, we have 1, 2, 3 in total. For Vanguard, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 in total. And for Martyr, we have 1, 2, 3 in total. So our setup is effectively a 5-3-3 with 5 on Vanguard, 3 on Liberty, and 3 on Martyr. Now, how is that affected in the camps? So it does clearly say that the prestige skill bonuses from different camps stack. So we have a 5-3-3 setup. So 5 gives us 15%, and 3 gives us 11 twice. So that gives us a total of 37% damage intensity and damage resistance for all of our units. Just quickly having a look at it, and this is quickly because I've already been recording for nearly 2 hours at this point. Just quickly looking at it, it looks like a 5-3-3 setup will give you 37%, and that seems to be pretty much as high as you can go with how things get stacked. So obviously if you're looking for a base to base or you're looking for a damage increase, you're going to want to look at which factions you can have 3 of and which faction you can have 5 of, and have that incorporated into your setup. Now, why have I gone for 5 Vanguard? Well, I specifically wanted the ATG. I specifically wanted double intercept. The bomber was a bonus. It wasn't necessarily the best bomber on the market, but it does what it says on the tin. And I did specifically want the missile, anti-air missile destroyer, which then gives me the option for what I would like for the 3 Martyr units and the 3 Liberty units. Well, I'm still doing base to basing and base defense, so I'm going to need at least 3 of my 4 remaining ground units are going to need to be artillery. And we have that capability. We've got 1 Martyr and 2 Lib, and we've then chosen to go with the infantry as our base to base capability, which then benefits from that 37% through the factions. And obviously the damage bonuses in the Navy are going to be applied to all 3, and we're really focusing on that 37% damage reduction or resistance from the armoured that's going to be available to us as well. So that's why we've set it up that way. I mean, I could have gone for an aircraft carrier, but I would have had less damage resistance and less damage intensity, and I did, to start off with, have a missile, an aircraft carrier and a frigate, so I've played with the frigate and the aircraft carrier as well. I do like the frigate. I think what's best for myself, thinking further down the line once the tech has been released, I think that it's going to be better if I try and stick all my eggs for the Navy in a single basket. I mean, you can do the same with air or the ground, depending on how you wish to focus yourselves. I would not recommend you do that with the ground, however. I recommend that you have at least 2 separate capabilities, whether that's field artillery, field soak artillery, or, you know, you get the picture, because ground is still going to be predominantly the focus of the game. It's going to be augmented by your air or augmented by your navy, or in the case of the actual navy map, replaced by. So until they integrate the navy better into the game, it's a simple fact of, would you rather have the navy better for the navy map, or would you rather have the air better for all maps? But even in air, you can't use your fighters to intercept the aircraft carriers bombers at the moment for some reason, and you can't use your bombers from your base to target enemy ships for some reason at the moment either. I can't understand why they made that decision. Personally, I think that is the wrong decision to make. If they're trying to integrate Navy into the game, there needs to be some cross-play between the Navy and the air, as well as the Navy and the ground. So big rivers, artillery, blah blah blah, stuff like that. The summary on how my base is currently being used. It's currently in a new alliance, so we've not got as much HP as what we otherwise would have, because this new alliance doesn't have any territory, it doesn't have any tech, but we are sitting nicely on 100. We are sitting nicely on 817 million base HP, with a wall setup of 70, 60, 60, 60. We do have a little bit more tech to show off, which is also relevant to this video, which is advanced city defense. We do have the 20% bonus, and we do also have a 3% recovery bonus, which is also very handy. We are working on completing the military tree as well. The reason for that being is I wouldn't be surprised if they lock the Navy behind it. Don't take my word for that. That is just a suspicion. Also, I kind of do need the Martyr's Watch HP, especially considering I've now effectively got a soak on the sea and a soak on the ground. So I'm gonna need to finish off this tree at some point. So that's all of the tech covered, all of the reasons we're using all of the tech. Now, other things that benefit my base. So last time I didn't show this video, this part of the video. Depending on how long this recording goes on for, this may or may not get put in. But we're looking at base HP. So we've got a base HP bonus of 75%, HP as a standard buff giving us a 41% bonus. Infantry, tank and artillery are all getting bonus HPs of 12 through 53% respectively. Fighter planes and bombers are getting a bonus of 4% HP. We are getting Vanguard divisions getting 18%, so is Camp Liberty. Martyr Watch is getting a 25% bonus on HP, which is really, like I said, we're using the armored destroyer and we're using the infantry. That is going to be a massive benefit to our base-to-base capability, both out at sea and out on the ground. It's going to be absolutely honking. And we've got the base HP, as I said, of 75%. We will just have a quick look at that because we're getting 65% of it from tech. We're getting 6% of it from skins. We're getting 1% from skin sets and 3% for being a city official. So these are damage resist bonuses. This is quite important obviously for our base to base capability and our base defense capability, as is our goal. We have a damage resist bonus of 55% as an overall damage resist bonus. Infantry damage resist versus artillery is at 10%, 9% versus tanks and 6% versus other infantry, although the damage resist versus tanks is currently going up to 10. We've got a base damage resistance bonus of 44% and 3% of that is coming from skins, but we do get 41% bonuses from base buildings, which will be the walls. So that's where we're getting a majority of our base damage resistance bonus from. Obviously we do get some from the officers as well. Base recovery rate, we're quite interested in this one. We're getting 10% from VIP benefits. I know a lot of people are much higher than me on VIP. I don't really invest too much gold into it or time into it because well, to be fair, I'm really absolutely pumping that gold into the wheel and various other parts of the game in order to get my officers up to scratch as fast as possible. And at the moment I'm between 5 and 6 weeks per awakened officer, which is a good... It means if I keep that rate up, I should be able to awaken all of my officers that I want to use by this time next year, plus all of their skills. We've got a 25% bonus from, or 26% bonus from tech. Now, something I didn't show is there are some additional techs within the modern tree, which are very, very handy if you're playing as a defensive / turtle player. We'll have a quick look at those. So we've got a base damage resist versus artillery. That's on the tree. With base HP, which is also on the modern tree. Bear in mind, these are in all of the modern trees. So base HP defense is really good. Really, really good. If you get down the modern tree for whatever you're doing, you really want to focus on specifically either offense or attack. And it's the same as you can see what I'm doing with my advanced infantry. I'm focusing heavily on the infantry defense rather than the infantry attack, and you can see that that's also reflected in the artillery and the aircraft advanced trees that I've shown you today. I've focused more on the attack capabilities than the defensive. And lastly, we're going to show off the skin sets. Well, I say lastly, it might not be lastly. Now, the reason why these are important, some of these they can be picked up easily, some of these take a long time to get, and others you will only get through spending money. All of which will become apparent as we scroll down. So obviously Tropical Paradise, that was during the summer, that was a summer event. It did give us 0.5% on our base damage resist and our troop damage resist, which is good because I can use that for both the base and for the infantry. We've also got a 1% bonus for HP. Again, that's handy for the base, it's handy for the infantry. And we do have a firepower bonus, which is handy for the artillery. Here we have the Particle X base effects, and that gives us bonus HP and additional base HP of 1%, which is extremely good. I recently finished Dragon's Descent here, and that's given us base and troop intensity of 1%, which is good for defensive and offensive capabilities for the artillery. We've got bonus firepower of 2%, which is great for the artillery. We do have a firepower and tank and helicopter HP of 2%, which is fairly irrelevant because we're not using tanks at all. But the firepower of 2% is nice. Tank and helicopter HP of 2% is kind of irrelevant. I'm not using an SH, so I don't really need it, but I needed everything else on that tree. Own the Pavilion of Prosperity. Yeah, if you missed out on this one, sucks to be you. Not gonna lie, these little tiny event ones that they do throughout the year, they all add up. If you manage to get them both, in the last 12 months, there's been 3 or 4 of them, and I think I've got them all. Here we go. We've got a troop and base damage resist of 0.5, so obviously it stacks. We've done the Frosty one last Christmas, which gives us a bonus to firepower. We've done the Shopping Festival as well, which I believe was last year. That gave us HP of 1%. We've done last year's birthday event as well, which gave us troop and damage intensity bonuses. Joint Command, I think there was actually another one attached to this if you got all 3 base color skins, which I don't think I got on this account. We got the Anniversary Omega mission. That is one of the best ones we've got, which is troop and base damage resistance of 1%. Obviously that's really handy for the infantry as well. The artillery firepower of 2%, firepower bonus for everything of 2%, and artillery firepower of another 2%. And of course we have the Penguin Palace as well. Now, unit skins. The unit skins are very important, because it depends on how you're specializing your ground capability or your air capability. The skins can directly affect that, and I will now demonstrate that to you. For those of you not aware, every time you own one of these skins, equipping it gives you a 5% bonus, as you can see here. And again here, you see we've got 2 Liberty ones out of the 4, each giving us a 5% bonus. And the anti-tank gun again giving us a 5% bonus. Now, what does that mean? Well, luckily we're doing this during this event. We can see here we've got all these ones owned. If we just click on this, it says unit firepower once equipped. But if we skip ahead, owning it, not equipping it, owning it gives us 2% artillery firepower bonus. And we've got all of the ones that are available in this store at the moment. And that includes the 2 RLs, the ATG, and 4 howitzers. So that's 2% a go being added onto our artillery. Now, it kind of sucks that if you don't spend money, it's very difficult to get those. But if you do try and get them through free-to-play by logging in every time they pop this event once a month, and you save up all of those coins, you have 2 options. You can either save up 1500 and get a base skin, or you can save up 300 and get a unit skin. Now, my recommendation to you, if you are a free-to-play player, will be to get the unit skins, but get the ones that benefit your units. Get the ones that benefit your units directly. either in HP or firepower, and then start building on other units in that category. So if you use helicopters and MBTs, you probably want to get the helicopter and MBT skins, and you probably want to target the helicopters or MBTs first, depending on which your main unit is that you like to use. And obviously, if you need to increase the HP of those units, you need to get the SH skins, but you've got to remember that applies to all helicopters and tanks. Think ahead, and you will be rewarded for it. Hopefully by middle of January we should have the infantry fully awakened, and they should be absolutely terrorizing people. At the moment, you can see here Everbloom's 4, 3, 3 and 3, so we're just over the halfway point, or just under the halfway point for statues required to have her awakened, and that's only been in a couple of weeks. So once the wheel comes round in another 2 weeks time, that is going to really crank her up another notch. We're going to get that tactical skill up to level 5, and then we're going to work on the blast mitigation up to level 5, and then we'll work on the 2 skills either side of that to get her up to level 5 on those respectively, to get her awakened as soon as possible. Because without her, my future plan of being involved in base-to-base capability is fairly irrelevant. So that's where I'm going. We've succeeded in our defensive capability by having 4 artillery. We do have one last surprise up our sleeve, just one last surprise. Now, I've shown this very little throughout this video, and you'll see just there we have a 7.2 Jackson, and it's got a skin on it. When I need to donate a fast unit to an AG, I take one of the Liberty artillery guns off. I then train in the Jackson. That's not all I've got surprised for you. Because we also have Madame Havoc awakened. And she's really awesome on a helicopter. Really awesome. She'll deal a hell of a lot of damage. Absolutely rinsing units. I had her for an entire L4 on the helicopter, for an entire L4 being out in the field, just plinking off enemy armor that was going in to reinforce and getting covered by my fighter for the entire L4. Managed to rack up loads of kills with this officer, absolutely loads. I don't have another tank officer to pair her with, not offensively anyway, so role-wise I'm fairly limited in her use. But we do have that capability of having an 8.1 attack helicopter with a very awesome officer on standby. Now you could say that, hey, doesn't really play into your main strategy, it's a bit of a waste. Yes, unfortunately you would be right. However, this gives me a degree of flexibility I otherwise wouldn't have, and this is what the infantry is going to do for me going forwards. I'll be able to have a degree of flexibility and then be able to flex and mold my operations in game towards whatever is needed. So if the alliance is setting up army groups and is lacking fast units and has an abundance of artillery, I will then be able to subsequently remove my howitzer and employ a helicopter, and I'll be able to do that with relative ease because we have extra officers that we're not using. Is this a sort of base you want to aim for? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Now, it's all very well and good being that big defensive guy, you know, that everyone's scared to engage, but as I have learnt myself and as I have taught others in the last L4, if you are so dangerous to attack, people stop attacking you. That means you're not going to gain kills, you're not then going to get up the fighting machine rank, and as a result you're not going to be able to really do much of anything. So you need to focus on an offensive capability. For me, that's the air assets. But the problem there is much the same. If people know they can't destroy my fighter, they don't engage me in the air. So by virtue of my fighter or my base being in place, I basically create an area of denial where people won't log in and fight. And it's a bit of a problem, which is why I'm focusing on infantry as a capability. And you might be the sort of person who does field fighting. I would recommend that you get yourself at least one artillery unit, one soak unit, and 3 field fighting units. And what I would do is I would take that soak unit and that artillery unit and focus it on a base-to-base setup, so you can at least soak up a medium strength base in comparison to your own strengths. Someone who's not as strong as you, but you're not going to be going toe-to-toe with a defensive monster. But you'll have some solo capability. You'll be able to start base-to-basing other players. The biggest problem I found in the last L4 was that there were too many players turtling, and I was in that category as well. There were too many of us doing it. A lot of people were sandbagging down from gold 2, gold 3, and they were sitting in silver 1, and they would just be like, come and attack me. Are you afraid to attack me? No, I'm not afraid to attack you. I'm just not a moron. And you shouldn't treat other players as such. Not everyone's going to throw units at a wall until that base is destroyed, and they shouldn't be taunted into such a behaviour. It's toxic. Unless, of course, that was your goal all along, then whatever, it doesn't really matter. It is a video game at the end of the day, and it is only pixels on a screen, and you can turn your phone and you can turn the application for the desktop off. So, my advice to you would be, whatever you're planning on doing, whether it's going to be Navy, Air or Ground as a main, choose one as a side, whether that is Air, Ground or, again, Navy, depending on how you want to play. Make sure you have at least some base-to-base capability. Make sure that you've got an SH, Infantry, an MBT, or you've got an Armoured Destroyer. Something that will give you something to do while you're waiting for AGs to pop up. You can sneak up on enemy bases and you can just go base to base with them, and you can just go hammer and tongs until you win. These capabilities are not utilized enough by other players. All of the players in the last L4 that done really well in the top 15, top 10 were all base to base players. Every single one of them. They were people who were going toe-to-toe with enemy bases and they were winning. They weren't going toe-to-toe with my base because it hurt them, but they were doing exactly that. And if I'd have had the infantry available to me at a capability which was going to enable me to retaliate in a base-to-base scenario, then I would not have been down in the 20s. I would have been up in the teens instead. So I think that the only bit of advice I can give you is don't follow in my footsteps exactly, but if you do, make sure you develop that base-to-base capability, and you develop it early on, because without it early on, you're not going to be able to decide on your flexibility. Like, would you rather go more helicopters? Would you rather go more artillery? You can give yourself a little bit of a degree of flexibility. As I said, I saw a number of bases that had like just 5 artillery pieces in them that were just pure defense. Good for you, buddy. We just drove around you. Oh, you're gonna block a build? We'll just build the village. We literally just built one village over, and that prevented him from being able to do anything. Yeah, sure, he racked up a load of kills when we were in a choke point and we had to kill him, but much like myself, he was just ignored for a large portion of that. No one wants to play like that. It's boring. You log in for 2 or 3 hours and wait for someone to come on with a soak unit so you can start an AG and start hitting enemy bases. No. There are players out there who I've met in the last L4 who have the base-to-base capability, and I genuinely believe that is the way you should be going if you are in silver, and then develop it from there as you move into gold, whether it's artillery or field or naval or air. But give yourself that capability to advance and attack an enemy base and deal damage to it. So that's the end of this very, very long video. As always, guys, there will be a link in the description box down below. You're more than welcome to join the Discord. Please donate a pizza to the rules, so you've made some sort of attempt to say that you've understood them. If you're wanting to message me on Discord, then once you're in the Discord server, feel free to do so. I don't bite often, only when I haven't been fed. And if you do see me in general chat, you are more than welcome to jump in and ask a question, whether it's warpath related or related to another game. I do play other games in there as well. I play things like Helldivers and Civilization, and sometimes Age of Empires 2, when I get to beat the crap out of my friends, and it's absolutely hilarious. But yeah, I've been the Smoking Cheddar. You've been very patient. I'm now very tired and I have a sore throat. I'm going to go get a cup of tea. Drink your cup of tea. It's probably cold. And hopefully you've missed that horrifying movie, Legally Blonde. Man, if you've made it this far into the video, what the fuck's wrong with you? Go outside and touch some goddamn grass, man. This is like 2 hours of my life. I've now got to spend 4 hours editing this. Just why? Why? Like, I know there's going to be at least one of you that makes it this far into the video. So if you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much. And I have a challenge for you. And I don't often ask this of anyone on any video, but just to wind up the people who don't know what goes on at the end of the videos, in the comments section down below, I would like to tell me your favourite cheese and what your favourite meal with cheese on is. Just put both of them in there. Don't talk about the video, just talk about cheese. Just talk about cheese. Confuse the crap out of people. It's great, it's hilarious. Just troll them.